All right, so you're thinking about reading A Court of Thorns and Roses
Yes.
by Sarah J. Maas.
Why?
But, there's all this buzz around it, and you're not really sure if it's worth your time.
Right.
We totally get it.
Definitely.
That's why we're here today.
Yeah, this is a deep dive into A Court of Thorns and Roses, and by the end, we promise you'll know whether to pick it up or just skip it entirely.
So let's jump right in. What kind of reader should be excited about this book?
So if you're a fan of fantasy romance, especially anything that gives you Beauty and the Beast vibes,
Okay.
with fairies and action, then this one might be for you.
I see it getting compared to Twilight and Game of Thrones quite a bit too.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like a blend of the two, but maybe not as intense as either one of them.
Okay, interesting. So the story follows Feyre. She's 19 years old. She's a huntress, and she kills a fairy.
Yeah.
Then she gets taken to this magical land called Prithian. I've heard she's like a Katniss Everdeen type character.
Yeah.
But some people find her frustrating and inconsistent. What's the deal with Feyre?
Well, Feyre is a complex character, and I think that's where people kind of get tripped up with her.
Okay.
On one hand, she's this strong and capable huntress. She's taking care of her family. She's surviving this really harsh world. But then she makes some decisions that just seem so out of character, like when she runs off to talk to the cereal. Yeah, even though everyone's warning her how dangerous it is, it's like she forgets her own survival instincts when it's convenient for the plot.
That's true. It's like, girl, you're supposed to be this skilled hunter. What are you doing?
Right. And honestly, that's a pretty common thing we see in YA fantasy.
Yeah.
This impulsive heroine who keeps getting into trouble.
Right.
Some people find it endearing, even relatable, but others find it to be really bad writing and a lack of character development.
Yeah, I can see both sides of that.
Yeah. Yeah, one reviewer even said that Feyre flip-flops between hating the Fae and being attracted to them so much that she feels less like a strong protagonist and more like a tool to move the plot forward.
Interesting. So let's talk about the love interest, Camlin. He's the one who takes her captive, right?
Yeah, he is.
Is he that classic, brooding, misunderstood hero?
He seems like that at first.
Okay.
All mysterious and powerful, but there are some serious red flags.
Oh, right.
Like a lot of reviewers pointed out that he can be very possessive and controlling.
Yeah.
Do you remember that scene where he throws a tantrum because she tries to leave the manor by herself?
Yeah. That's not very Beauty and the Beast of him.
No, not really. And the relationship also moves really fast, which some readers found unrealistic and a little bit unsettling considering the power dynamic between them.
Okay, so not really a slow burn then.
No, not really. One review I saw even called it insta-love on steroids.
Ouch. So maybe Tamlin isn't the dreamboat we were hoping for.
Maybe not.
But I've been seeing a lot about this other fairy, Rysand. Everyone seems to love him. Is he another love interest?
He definitely becomes a significant character in the series.
Okay.
But to call him just a love interest would be doing him a disservice. He's more of a morally gray character.
Okay.
Really powerful and cunning. Definitely shrouded in mystery. And a lot of readers found him way more interesting than Tamlin.
Yeah.
They loved his complexity and how his motivations are revealed slowly throughout the story.
So is he like the bad boy with a heart of gold then?
It's more nuanced than that, I would say. He really challenges the typical good versus evil thing. You're never quite sure whose side he's on, and that keeps you guessing.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It makes you question who you should trust and who you're rooting for.
Exactly.
That reminds me of Throne of Glass a little bit.
Yeah.
With all the morally gray characters and shifting alliances. Speaking of Throne of Glass, how does the world building in A Court of Thorns and Roses compare?
Well, that's where the opinions really start to differ. Some readers loved the fairy world that Maas created. They were praising the descriptions and all the magical elements.
Yeah.
But some readers found it to be a little predictable, even childish.
Really?
Like the antagonist, Amarantha. She gets a lot of criticism for being one-dimensional and cartoonishly evil.
Not very nuanced then.
No, not really. It's like she walked right out of a Disney movie.
Okay. So maybe not as groundbreaking as some other fantasy worlds.
Right.
So what about the writing itself? Does Maas's style make up for any of the world-building issues?
She's really good at writing action scenes.
Okay.
And she knows how to build sexual tension.
Yeah.
But there are some things about her writing style that can be a little hit or miss.
Like what?
Well, she tends to overuse certain phrases like ripped to ribbons.
Okay.
And some readers found that repetitive and distracting.
Yeah.
And then there's the constant emphasis on mate and bond when she's talking about romantic relationships, which can feel a little heavy-handed.
Okay, so we have a complex heroine, a potentially problematic love interest, a morally gray wild card. A world that's either magical or juvenile, depending on who you ask, and writing that's engaging but sometimes repetitive.
Yeah.
Is this book even worth reading?
That is the question, isn't it?
Oh.
And the answer is, it depends.
Oh, come on. Don't leave me hanging. What do I need to consider to make this decision?
Don't worry, we'll break it all down. But first, let's talk a bit more about those writing quirks.
Okay.
Especially how Maas uses language when it comes to consent and power dynamics.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, because those are a big part of why this book gets such strong reactions.
All right. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, let's pick up where we left off, talking about Tamlin's possessive behavior.
Okay.
You know how we were talking about Tamlin being all possessive? Mm-hmm. Well, some readers felt like the language Maas uses, especially with the words like mate and bond, it kind of makes it seem like Feyre doesn't really have a choice, you know?
Right. It's like a forced connection, which I guess can be romantic in some ways.
Yeah.
But it also feels a bit creepy, especially when you think about the power difference between a human and this all-powerful fairy lord.
Exactly. And that's where all those Twilight comparisons come in, I think.
Yeah.
You have this young woman falling for a supernatural being who's super powerful. And some people find that whole dynamic really attractive, but others find it problematic, like it's romanticizing an unhealthy relationship.
So it's not just about if you like fantasy romance. It's also about how you feel about those power dynamics and consent and all that.
Exactly. It's about being aware of those themes and if you're okay with them.
Right. Makes sense. So it's not just about steamy scenes.
No.
It's about how mature the themes are, too.
Yeah. And that's why some people think A Court of Thorns and Roses is more new adult than young adult.
Okay. I can see that.
Yeah.
So you said it depends on whether this book is worth reading. What else should I be thinking about?
Well, it depends on what you're looking for in a fantasy novel.
Okay.
If you like intricate worlds and political stuff like in Game of Thrones or Brandon Sanderson, you might find this one a little simple. Especially this first book.
Okay.
It's more about Feyre's personal journey and her relationship.
So it's more character-driven than plot-driven.
I think so, yeah. The plot is mostly there to help Feyre grow and learn about the fairy world.
Okay.
If you like that kind of character focus and emotional stuff, then you'll probably like it.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for epic battles and crazy magic systems and tons of plot twists, you know, then you might be disappointed.
So it's not for the hardcore fantasy fans who love all that intricate world building.
Probably not.
But what about people who are drawn to stories about strong female characters? Does Feyre end up being one of those?
That's a big question, and it really depends on how you look at her actions.
Okay.
Some people think her journey is really empowering.
Yeah.
She starts off as this vulnerable girl forced into this strange world, but she learns to survive, and she becomes more assertive.
So she's not just waiting around for someone to rescue her.
No, not at all. She takes risks, she makes mistakes, and she learns to fight for what she believes in.
Oh, okay. I like that.
But then some people think her growth is kind of ruined by how inconsistent she is and how much she relies on the male characters.
Yeah, I could see that.
They feel like she reacts to things more than she actually drives the plot herself.
So she's one of those characters that people either love or hate.
It seems that way, yeah. And those are usually the characters you remember the most, right?
They definitely stick with you. So we've got mixed opinions on the plot, the world building, and even the main character. But everyone keeps talking about Rysand. Is he actually that great?
Oh, Rysand? He really makes this series more than just a typical fairy romance.
Oh, okay.
He's that morally gray character we talked about.
Yeah.
And he adds all this mystery and complexity that keeps readers hooked.
So is he good or bad? Is he a lover or a villain?
That's the fun part. You have to keep reading to find out.
Oh, come on.
Maas is really good at keeping his true intentions a secret, so you're always questioning everything. He challenges Feyre's ideas, pushes her limits, and he's really important to her development.
So I'm getting a slow burn romance vibe from this. But how is Rysand different from other bad boy characters in fantasy?
Oh, he's definitely in that category. But Maas avoids all the usual cliches, and she gives him real depth.
Okay.
Like, unlike Warner from Shatter Me,
Right.
Rysand's darkness is tied to his past and his vulnerabilities, and that all comes out as the series goes on.
So he's not just a brooding fairy with a bad reputation.
No, not at all. There's so much more to him.
That's interesting. So that's what makes him so captivating for people.
Yeah, you love to hate him, but you also hate to love him, you know?
Yeah.
He makes you think, and he makes you question what you believe is right and wrong.
Okay. I'm starting to get why people love this book so much. It's not perfect, but there's something there for everyone.
Yeah.
But what if I want a fairy romance that's more like a retelling of Beauty and the Beast?
Oh, there are definitely some other options.
Like what?
If you want something that really explores the psychology of that story, then Cruel Beauty by Rosamund Hodge is amazing.
Okay.
The heroine in that one is way more in control of her own destiny, and the Beast is much more complex, and his struggles are explored in a lot more detail.
That sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
What if I want a series with similar intensity in characters, but in a different fantasy world?
Well, Maas actually has another series called Throne of Glass.
Well, yeah.
It's about a female assassin in a world of magic and politics.
Okay.
It's definitely more mature and complex than A Court of Thorns and Roses, but you'll find similar themes of power and betrayal and self-discovery.
So we've got some good options to consider.
Mm-hmm.
But why is this book so popular when it has all these problems?
I think it's a few things. First, it's really easy to read, and it keeps you entertained.
Okay.
It's like a page-turner, you know?
Yeah.
Second, it has those tropes that people love, forbidden romance, magical creatures, and all that. And it really makes you feel things. Whether you love the characters or hate them, you care about what happens to them.
So it's kind of a guilty pleasure read.
Yeah, I think so. It's not the most intellectual book.
Yeah.
But it's fun, and it lets you escape for a while.
I get that.
Mm.
So we've talked about the good, the bad, and everything in between.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what's the verdict? Should I read it, or should I just go for Cruel Beauty or Throne of Glass?
So if you want a fun fantasy romance that's easy to read, and you don't mind some predictable stuff and a few inconsistencies here and there,
right,
then yeah, go for it. You might really like it.
So it's a good way to escape, even if it's not the best fantasy book ever.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a beach read, but with fairies and romance.
Okay.
You might roll your eyes at some of the stuff, but you'll probably still have fun with it.
But what if I want something more, something that's going to make me think? Should I just go straight for Cruel Beauty or Throne of Glass?
If you want a more complex Beauty and the Beast story, or a fantasy world with all that political intrigue and morally gray characters,
right,
then yeah, those other books might be better for you.
Okay, so it really just depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's what comes down to, and that's what we're here for.
Exactly, to help you figure out what books are worth your time.
Yeah.
So what do you think, listener?
Yeah.
Are you ready to jump into this world of fairies and romance and adventure, even if it's a little bumpy sometimes?
Yeah. Or are you looking for something deeper, something that will really make you think?
Whatever you choose, we hope this deep dive has helped you decide.
Yeah, happy reading.
And that's it for today. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a new book.